Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned to answer the question, will I leave behind thousands of books? Someday, when I pass away, will I just leave behind a house full of thousands and thousands of books? I hope not. But it is a question and a subject that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. And it's highlighted the fact that my attitude and my feelings about physical books has changed over time, and quite a bit actually in the last couple years. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. The reason, of course, this has really been on my mind recently is, of course, the passing of our dear friend, Sean D. Standfast, who did pass away, and he left behind thousands of books. And of course, when that happens, somebody has to take care and deal with the thousands of books that you've left behind. And a good friend of Sean's had to come in and deal with that. And I think that is something that a lot of us, those of us who have a lot of books, it's something we think about. What's going to happen to all the books that we own? You know, how will they be dealt with? It's a subject that can be a cause of curiosity and occasionally of concern if we have a lot of books to deal with. And if I were to drop dead right now, indeed, I would leave behind thousands of books, because there are thousands of books here at the manor. And I don't need thousands of books. That's true. And it does make me think, well, what will become of these books that are in my house? And of course, if I drop dead today, the lady of the manor would have to deal with all of this stuff, which I don't think would particularly thrill her. I don't think that's a job she would really want. But, it's something I think about. And I've been thinking about it a great deal over time. And I have a particular attitude towards the books in my house, and I have for quite some time. So, first of all, behind me, you will see a bookshelf. This is the center not only of my library, but my entire house, really, in my mind. This is the center of existence here, which is why I film here. And on this bookcase, which is actually quite tall, it goes up a ways, this bookcase. On this bookcase are all the books that I consider to be permanent residents of my library. These books are the books that I would never, ever get rid of. All of those books are here. Every other book in my library I consider visitors. They're just visitors. Visitors that never leave, like you, Roger. But that's how I consider them. Someday, all of those books, will go. Eventually. While these will stay. And I could, theoretically, get rid of all of the books in my house, except for these, and I would be fine as a reader, because I don't mind reading on an e-reader or a tablet, actually. I don't mind e-reading at all. And whenever I mention e-reading, there will be a bunch of people who will write down in the comments how much they hate e-reading and e-readers. Always. I hate e-readers. I could never read e-readers. I hate e-books. Yes, I know, and that's fine. You can hate them. I don't mind. You can feel however you want about it. Me personally, I don't mind them at all. I think the experience of reading an ebook really isn't different for me than it is to read a physical book, because I get involved with the reading of the text, and how the text is delivered to me doesn't matter that much. except occasionally, if it is a physical book with tiny, teensy tiny print, or there's some other issue with the book itself. With ebooks, you could pretty much adjust the text and the font to whatever you want. I just don't have an issue with them. I think they're pretty great, actually. And I have thousands of ebooks. And I have a lot of doubles. Like, I will have physical books. Very often I will have an ebook copy of that physical book floating around in the cloud. And it has been correctly pointed out that, yeah, all of these things could vanish. It could happen. Amazon could disappear, and I guess Apple could disappear, and wherever else your ebooks are, I guess someday they could just vanish. I guess it's unlikely, but it could happen, or they could take your books away. Stuff like that, because you don't really own them. I get it. I get that. That's why I have these. These are the books that, if every other book in the world vanished, I still have this stuff. And these are the books here on this bookcase that I could read and reread for a long, long time to come. But I don't think it'll ever be the case that, ebooks will just completely vanish. I find that unlikely. Technology of that sort just doesn't tend to go away. Although it's possible. There could be an electromagnetic pulse or something like that. And I don't get too hung up on the whole ownership part of it. Even physical books you could lose. Fires, floods, disasters. You might have to move across the country and you don't want to carry a million books. Things could happen, So I don't concern myself too much in that part of it. There are readers who are real readers who don't own very many physical books at all. There is the other side of that, though, in that there are a lot of physical books that only exist as physical books and do not exist as ebooks at all. So there's a real interest there in keeping those particular books, just in case you ever want to read them again or read them at all. But yeah, these are the permanent residents. And what I plan to do over time, and it probably won't happen it probably won't even start happening until a couple years from now, whenever I finish the 500 book challenge that I'm on. In a couple years, I will start slowly to divest myself of books. Not all of them. There are books that I'm always probably going to keep. But I have so many of them. And many of the books that I own, since I have so many of them, they're not even on bookcases. They're in weatherproof plastic tubs, stacks and stacks of them, because that's literally the only space for them, because there are so many. I think space is an issue that those of us who love books it's always been an issue, and for decades and decades, of course, hundreds of years, actually, there's been no other choice but to kind of hoard books if you love books and just want all of these books to have access to. But now, thanks to modern technology, ebook technology does exist. So there's no real reason to have tons and tons and tons of books if they are available to you to read in another form. That's how I look at it. And I've thought more and more about that over time. And, and this, of course, only works for me because I like ebooks and don't mind reading electronically. But eventually, over time, yeah, I'm going to significantly cut down the number of books that I own physically. Just because, I have to think to that time in the future when somebody else will have to deal with all of that stuff. What is it called? Is it the Swedish art of death cleaning? It's much different than the death cleaning I usually have to do after this one over here. But, there's something to that. I figure I've got probably, the odds are in my favor to live another 10, maybe 20 years, maybe 25, who knows, but probably not too much longer than that. And I always have to think, yes, I have to worry about accident or incident or violence or anything else that can happen to a person. And that, yeah, I could go at any time. All of us could. But the odds are in my favor to live another 10, 20 years. So I do have probably time to think about this and decide exactly how I'm going to dispose of all the extra books that are cluttering up the house and the storeroom and everything else. I will slowly start to do that. I probably will start to do that a little bit fairly soon. Because, no, I do not want to leave behind thousands of books. I just don't. I don't want anybody else to have to deal with it. Also, it will give me some control over where the books go and how exactly they're disposed of. Disposed of sounds terrible when you talk about a book, but I'm thinking of putting books, into the hands of people who actually might appreciate them if possible. Because, if you just die and you leave behind thousands of books, who knows where they're going to go? Heaven forbid, some of them might even end up in the recycling center. I've rescued books from the recycling center before, but I don't want any books to fall into destruction if I could help it. I just have too much affection for books. So eventually, yeah, I'm going to have to do that. I don't see any other real option because I've pretty much maxed out the space available in the manor, believe it or not. And some extra space would be nice, frankly. And like I said, I don't mind reading ebooks, which take up no space at all. Your e-reader breaks down or gets old, you can get another one, You will always have, in the modern world, some sort of technology that you could read books on. It's just, it's just part of the world that we live in. And like I said, if for some reason it's not, I've got these. This is my emergency backup. These are the physical books I will always own. And this is, it's a work in progress. But I'm working on this bookshelf. And soon, within the next couple weeks, I will do an updated bookshelf tour, which I haven't done for this particular bookcase for years. And it's quite a bit different from the last time that I did that. And so I will talk about, when I do that video, the books that are on this shelf or bookcase and why they're here, why these are the permanent fixtures in the manor. And everything else could go eventually and will go eventually. So that's all I have to say about that particular subject. I will catch you next time.